Greetings, friends. You are on the Ruslan Belov channel, and today we will discuss the situation in Ukraine as of March 22nd, 2025. A tremendous number of events have occurred today, so let's get started. We will begin with the Pokrovsk direction. According to information from various sources, as of March 22nd, 2025, the armed forces of the Russian Federation have managed to completely clear the settlement of Uspanovka, located west of Novovasilievka. Today, all experts familiar with the situation expect that the Russian Ministry of Defense will confirm this information in their next report. If this information is confirmed, we will of course update the map. Next, we move to the Chasiv Yar direction. Perhaps the most important news is coming from this sector of the front. Based on the data received over the past few days, it can be concluded that the fighting for the city of Chasiv Yar is coming to an end. The armed forces of the Russian Federation have managed to encircle and trap Ukrainian formations located in the central part of the city and in the high-rise areas. Today, there is information that Ukrainian units have made their first attempts to break through via the Stavok Dniprovsky, a small reservoir. However, we understand that this breakout attempt was doomed to fail from the start. Here, we also see that Russian units have established 50% control over the Shevchenko district. This is based on geolocation data and objective control footage. Some pro-Ukrainian sources, which have connections with units on the ground, report that at the moment Ukrainians control only 2 districts in Chasiv Yar and 2 villages around Chasiv Yar. Most likely, these are the villages of Mykolivka and Stupochki. These are 2 villages that are adjacent to Chasiv Yar and are part of the Chasiv Yar agglomeration. As for the 2 districts, it is most likely the southern district and plant number. Second district, it seems that the Shevchenko district has either already fallen or Ukrainian units are completing the withdrawal of their soldiers. Or this will happen in the next 24 to 48 hours, after which the road to Kostiantynivka will essentially be open. Ukrainian sources also note that the main defense is currently concentrated in the area of the village of Stupochki, as Ukrainian units and command clearly understand that if Stupochki falls, the next strike will be along the H-32 highway directly towards Kostiantynivka, after which it is unclear how the situation will develop. I repeat, the battle for Chasiv Yar is coming to an end, and it is certain that by May 9th, everything here will be cleared, possibly even some districts of Kostiantynivka itself. Next, we move to the Lyman direction, where the advance of Russian units towards the village of Torska has been noted. This information was primarily confirmed by pro-Ukrainian mapping services, although most experts and cartographers not affiliated with Ukraine have long marked these territories as under Russian control. Pro-Ukrainian sources also note a breakthrough by Russian units west of Novolyubovka. Over the past day, the Russian army has managed to take control of this bridgehead and approach settlements such as Zelenaya Dolina, Lipovo, Katerinivka, and Redkodub. That is, the fighting is already beginning for this strategic sector of the front. If the Ukrainian side loses control over this sector, it is worth noting that there are many reservoirs further ahead. There are villages like Karpivka, Seredina, Novoselivka, and Derelov located along the reservoirs, which serve as a natural barrier against possible flanking attacks. If this sector of the front is taken under control, the Russian side will be able to move further south without hindrance. I remind you that when Ukrainian units performed such a maneuver in 2022, Russian forces were able to hold Lyman for only a few weeks before being forced to retreat. So now, it seems, a similar situation will repeat itself. Movement in the southern direction will begin. The battle for Lyman may also occur in the coming weeks. Next, we move to, let's say, the Sudzha direction, the Belgorod direction. By this morning, some neutral cartographers have updated the maps along the border. According to certain experts, the Ukrainian side has indeed managed to create a small buffer zone. At the moment, it is not clear whether Ukrainian forces have managed to enter the settlements of Demidovka or Grafovka. It seems that this has not yet been achieved and may never be. However, in any case, certain forest belts, fortified areas, and positions along the border on Russian territory are now under the control of infantry units of the armed forces of Ukraine. This is all happening against the backdrop of the Russian side not yet having fully cleared the Sudzha district. Yes, a lot of information is being published about further advances, and footage of countless captured equipment is being shared. However, these last four villages remain under the control of the Ukrainian Armed Forces, UAF. These are Gogolevka, Guyeva, Gornyal, and Oleshnya. Four villages that have been under Ukrainian control for weeks, despite the Russian army spending 2 or even 3 weeks trying to take them. We can see that the pace of the offensive has stalled, primarily due to the fact that a large number of FPV drone operators have been redeployed to the Belgorod direction to stabilize the situation. In other words, the final clearing of the Sudzha district in Kursk Oblast is being delayed for several weeks. Perhaps closer to May, the situation will stabilize, but by then, the trees will have foliage, making clearing operations even more difficult. It is also unclear how drones operating on fiber optics will perform when leaves appear on the trees. This will likely complicate drone movement and may slightly reduce the intensity or effectiveness of this type of weaponry. But we will see how the situation develops in late spring and summer. For now, events are on the brink of unfolding. Moving to the South Donetsk direction, the large pocket between Andreevka and the settlement of Zaporizhzhia has been almost completely cleared. The Russian army has also reached the outskirts of the settlement of Oleksandriivka. Interesting footage is coming from the Zaporizhzhia front, showing strikes on UAF infantry caught during movement. The Russian army is constantly launching harassing strikes on UAF positions on the right bank of the Dnipro River. Of course, a crossing of the river will not happen soon, as it requires enormous resources, both human and material. Greater Novosilovka direction, Vesela, Shevchenko. Here, the grinding down of the main defensive line of the Ukrainian armed forces north of Velika Novosilka continues, along with securing the flanks of the offensive. As part of these tasks, units of the Vostok grouping are engaged in fighting for Vesela and continue to drive a wedge along the line of strongpoints between Shevchenko and Volnopol. Despite the currently slow pace of advancement, the threat to the enemy's front here grows every day. As soon as the enemy is sufficiently pressured and pushed back to enable a breakthrough to the north, it will be attempted. And then, panic will begin again for some. For now, the UAF command is deciding which direction in the south is more important for them, Zaporizhzhia or Novopavlivka, in order to allocate their limited reserves there. The resolution of this dilemma will provide clarity on where the Russian army will advance faster and where it will slow down. The UAF clearly lacks sufficient reserves for all sectors. Even Ukrainian semi-military public pages acknowledge that the activity of the Russian army in the area of the Vovcha River basin has noticeably increased in recent days. Our units have resumed attempts to enter and secure Oleksandriivka, and according to enemy sources, fighting is already taking place on its outskirts. Thus, the next target, Bohatyr, has been clearly identified, and the enemy understands that battles for this last major stronghold in the Vovcha River Valley will soon begin. After this, holding the lower reaches of the river will become very problematic, especially if we achieve success north of Velika Novosilka and break through to Kama. Toretsk direction. The situation for the UAF has sharply deteriorated. The arrival of units from the 150th Motorized Rifle Division has significantly shifted the balance of forces in this direction. Even the UAF acknowledges in their blogs that they have no chance of holding the front for long without additional reserves. Moreover, the front north of Toretsk has already begun to collapse, leading to the complete clearing of the enemy's presence from the northern outskirts of the city. Furthermore, Russian army units continue to advance here in the general direction of Delivka. This is happening alongside a simultaneous deterioration of the situation for the UAF in the Chasiv Yar area. Trump's statement on Ukraine. Trump stated that the outlines of a deal on Ukraine, following contacts with Putin and Zelensky, are already in place, and a complete ceasefire in Ukraine will soon be achieved. According to him, negotiations on territorial division and a full ceasefire between Russia and Ukraine are currently underway. At the meeting on Monday, the Ukrainian delegation will be led by Defense Minister Umerov. As previously stated, Kyiv will provide a list of its infrastructure facilities to which it proposes extending the truce. Zelensky today said, according to Trump, that discussions with Russia included not only halting strikes on energy infrastructure, but also on other civilian infrastructure objects. The Kremlin, however, clarified today that during Putin's conversation with Trump, the discussion was only about a moratorium on strikes against energy infrastructure, and no agreements were reached regarding other infrastructure objects. Peskov today called Kyiv's claims that Russia itself shelled the Sudzha station absurd. Zelensky's criticism of the UN peacekeeping mission proposal. Zelensky negatively assessed the idea of creating a UN-led peacekeeping mission for Ukraine, which, according to media reports, was proposed by France. The Ukrainian president stated that the UN would not protect Ukraine, as it would not have the appropriate mandate, and therefore could not serve as an alternative to security guarantees or a peacekeeping contingent. U.S. Special Envoy's remarks. U.S. Special Envoy for Ukraine Keith Kellogg stated that Zelensky himself initiated the recent phone call with Trump, not the other way around. Kellogg emphasized that it is extremely important for Trump that he is not the one making the calls, but receiving them. This applies to the leaders of China, Mexico, Canada, and Denmark, all of whom call Trump, and he highlights this. The only leader about whose phone call it is not announced who called whom is Putin. A special relationship. According to Kellogg, the US president graciously agreed to the call. Kellogg also shared how he tried to prepare Zelensky for the meeting with the US president, but the Ukrainian leader made a mistake by playing to the public. I think 2 or 3 weeks ago in the Oval Office, President Zelensky started playing to the public. We warned him that morning, don't do that. But he played with the press when they came in, and I said, oh, he's going down a bad path with President Trump. And that's exactly what happened. Everything was fine until the press came in, and then, as if a switch was flipped, everything changed when he, Zelensky, was brought out. From the White House, the president said, I've had enough. Kellogg added, I think Zelensky then realized what had happened. U.S. perspective on the conflict. In the U.S., it is believed that the central issue in resolving the conflict in Ukraine is the status of 5 regions. This was stated by Donald Trump's special envoy, Stephen Witkow, in a conversation with journalist Tucker Carlson. First and foremost, the biggest issue in this conflict is the so-called 4 regions: Donbass, Crimea. They are Russian-speaking. Referendums were held there, and the overwhelming majority of people indicated that they want to be under Russian rule, Witkow said. The American politician also emphasized that he considers this issue fundamental to resolving the conflict in the region. And that's all for now, dear friends. Thank you for watching. Subscribe to the channel, leave your likes, and all the best to you.